Hello and good evening, one and all, and welcome back to another episode of AI News, Drama, and Updates. What we're taking a look at now is ChatGPT's new multimodality. This isn't publicly available just yet, but it's in the works and coming very soon. This is Dall-e 3. Now, one of the things that's most noteworthy about Dall-e 3 is it's not really meant for prompt engineering. It's not really meant for you to be able to get better and better at understanding how to kind of generate models. It's meant to be more conversational. So they put together this little video that gives you a demonstration of how you can build onto an existing story, adding more and more context and creating different versions of different things until you can eventually get what you want. And while I agree this is actually really impressive looking technology, and it's going to be a great addition to GPT-4, especially for people that have already been using like GPT Plus and things like that, it's also going to be available through Microsoft Bing. But at the same time, it's something that has been available and hasn't really been accessible until recently. And that's probably due to competition now. We've got Google Bard who's making moves. We've got Claude who's actually competing directly against OpenAI. So when we talk about competition heating things up and making this a better space for everyone, this is a good example of just that. Now, the experience that I've had with it so far is similar to probably what you've had experience with. It's mainly just been the videos and the marketing material and screenshots here and there of some of the output. The articles here focus on their cutting down of harmful image generation, and that's due to biases, and it's also due to being able to put like artist names directly into the prompt. Because prompting works differently with Dall-e 3 by design, it's not going to be the same thing. It looks like they've taken steps to actually remove living artists' names directly from the generator. But in addition, they've also taken the extra steps to allow artists to opt out individual pieces of art that they don't want involved in the model, or maybe remove it from the training material. Now, despite all of the legal trouble that OpenAI seems to be in, all of the different lawsuits you might be hearing about, there isn't actually any legal reason for them to have done this just yet. They're probably just getting ahead of some of the complaints and some of the challenges that Stable Diffusion and Midjourney have been up against since day one. One of the biggest differences is, though, comparatively, OpenAI has the money to be able to fight just about any legal battle thrown at it. And like we discussed last week, too, Microsoft is even making statements that they will legally back people who are sued for using AI-generated stuff that uses their tools, which are essentially OpenAI's tools as well. So while it looks like the experience with Dall-e might be a bit more restrictive, you won't be able to type, the names of public figures and do deepfakes. You won't be able to get specific artist styles if that's what you're trying to emulate. The biggest difference I see right now between this and the other image generators is really the way that you're generating through a conversation, which may be a little bit of a shock for people that thought prompt engineering was going to be a job of the future. But what it seems like moving forward is that getting good with the individual model that you're choosing to work with in terms of practice or working within the little sandbox, the restrictions that you're given, there does definitely seem to be a learning curve with each of these models, and you can get better and better. One of the images that's been making its rounds on the internet is this spiral design, which a lot of people really got a kick out of until they realize that this is AI generated. As you might have seen in other videos, through using tools like ControlNet, Stable Diffusion is very powerful at using those tools and using that context to change the outcome of different graphics. So not only is it capable of doing spirals and cool stuff like that, but you're also going to see a lot of different examples of ways that it can put things together contextually in ways that you may not have never been able to imagine. You'll see it be able to combine different pictures, do optical illusions, and do things that artists just simply can't do very easily. Now, that said, before you get angry in the comments, I'm not saying that they can't do them at all. I'm just saying that this is a much easier thing for Stable Diffusion to accomplish than we would have previously thought. And you can see it comes down to simply just using simple ControlNet features. A black and white spiral overlaid over a regular landscape gives you a spiral landscape. A grid pattern might give you something very different, as you've seen. So experimentation here has led to a lot of really cool art pieces. Now, a little bit of a segue from art. Now, we did cover this story, and this is more of an opinion piece. I'm going to drop this in the description so you guys can read through that if you want. This was an interesting take from Timothy Lee of Ars Technica. Now, this article goes back in time, and it covers some of the historical precedent between the copyright law and how it adapted with the invention of photography. Now, keep in mind, when you take a picture, you're just pointing a camera at something and hitting a button. The level of human involvement there is questionable, or at least it was back in time. It made it all the way to the Supreme Court. Now, if you fast forward a little bit to the decisions that have been made recently with the Zendaya of the Dawn article, the comic book that they weren't allowed to copyright, for example, the author of this particular article, I think, makes a really good claim that they may have picked the wrong precedent. It's something that doesn't seem to really be scalable. And basically, the long and short of it is the same rules that they said shouldn't allow AI art to be art should also stop you from being able to take like a landscape photograph and copywriting it. So I don't think it'll be a surprise to anyone that as time goes on, they're going to have to continue to explore the boundaries of copyright. They're going to have to continue to press against those boundaries and see what happens. The AI art argument, all of these things have been extremely tumultuous, so definitely keep an eye on this channel, subscribe if you haven't already, and of course, as things come to pass, I'm going to cover it week by week. Speaking of which, George R.R. Martin, who couldn't finish his own series, has now sued OpenAI for copyright infringement, joining Sarah Silverman and everybody else who were basically making the claim that OpenAI is stealing from them. Now, not only does this play into the previous story we were just talking about with the AI art argument, the conversation, the decisions that have been made, and the precedents that have already been set, but it also plays into an update from the Sarah Silverman lawsuit that we spoke about previously. Now, this is all ongoing at the same time as the writer's strike, and it is definitely related to that as well. So the news I have for you in that regard is I did see some rumblings of positive movement. At least they were going back to the negotiating table and maybe coming up with something. And there's even an update here on this article that seems somewhat promising, that it seems like OpenAI themselves, ChatGPT, is involved in those discussions. You can see here in the official statement, it says, "We're having productive conversations with many creators around the world, including the Authors Guild, and have been working cooperatively to understand and discuss their concerns about AI. Now, you know my opinion on it. I don't believe that there's going to be a world without AI. You can't really put the genie back in the bottle, but I do believe that we can work out a compromise. We can figure out how to move forward from here." Now, one of the boundaries I would say you should probably set in place is if you're uploading more than, let's say, a book a day, ban that person. I'm not against the idea of using AI as a tool to create a book or to help you write, or maybe to overcome writer's block, to help you brainstorm, something like that. But if you've reached the point where you're writing faster than you could even read, we've lost the plot. Books are not going to be entertaining or valuable at that point, and they're really just a waste of compute. If you think about it, who's going to take the time to read AI-generated books that are coming out at this pace? So I think it's maybe not a terrible idea to cap book publications. I don't know about 3 per day. That still seems mighty excessive. But, it's Amazon. What do you want? Now, the other part of this, keep in mind, is that you're supposed to tell Amazon if your book has AI-generated components. That's part of one of the rules that they set up. But I don't believe that there's consequences if you don't. And you can't really get caught because there aren't really AI detectors out there. So I'm not sure how they're working that out on the back end. But clearly that level of productivity, if you're shooting out like 4 or 5 books a day, that is questionable, to say the least. In a section of today's video I want to call Culture Shift, I want to talk a little bit about AI art. When I very first saw this article, I didn't realize that they were talking about a board game. I thought they were talking about the video game adaptation that I've seen on Steam. When it comes to Kickstarter and how their policies actually roll out, they don't have an anti-AI art stance, they just require that you're very upfront about it. And this project seems to have been very honest. They're using Dream Studio, they're using Midjourney, they're using a lot of different stuff to create a lot of the image generation here. The rest of this article kind of goes into an interview/opinion piece on how AI art is used in the industry. For example, Wizards of the Coast and their decision not to use AI in the world of Magic the Gathering. Now, Travis Worthington, who is the president of the game studio behind this thing, in response to that, he basically said, "I think that's going to be impossible to enforce." And it would seem like he's got an outlook that's kind of similar to mine. I don't believe that this is going anywhere, and you can't really do much to stop it. You have to find ways to adapt around it. And of course, like a lot of articles, they talk about the potential possibility of one day maybe there'll be an ethical AI model. But the closest thing that you can really get to ethical, copyright-free anything is going to be Firefly, which a lot of people should have mixed feelings about. All right, here is an article that is very short, doesn't have a ton of information, but I want to cover it and I want to touch on it because it's likely that this is going to evolve into a bigger story. What we're seeing right now are potential rumblings that different laws might be put in place that would potentially give individual artists a little bit more power. The nutshell version of this is we've got a Protect Musicians Act, which is already in place. This is a revised version of it. And the way that the article reads, it says, "As it stands right now, the current laws leave a lot of artists, whether signed to a major label or independently working, unprotected, and at the mercy of major platforms like Apple, Spotify, YouTube." And it seems like if this is passed, it's going to give individual artists more negotiating power. At least that's the way that it reads right now. I haven't seen the wording of the bill, so I don't know exactly how that works. But we've certainly talked many, many times before about the exploitation of artists, of writers, of the musicians, and really the people who are making the stuff that's being sold. So if this really is a way of putting power back in the hands of the artists, I'm all for it. Google Bard is a topic that we don't get to talk about a lot because they don't really do a lot with it, and it hasn't made a huge splash in the industry. There's not a lot of Bard lovers out there, but that might change soon. There's apparently some plugins coming down the line that are going to make things more powerful. It's been running with a new engine, which has made things a lot more relevant. But what it seems like this can potentially do is include the stuff that's involved in your Gmail account. Your Gmail itself, your appointments, your calendar, all that stuff can be part of the large language model and how it processes information. The relevancy of the information it gives is going to be very contextually relevant to you. Imagine a world where I could go to Google Bard and ask questions about my specific YouTube channel and get relevant answers, or ask questions about something that was emailed to me years ago. That may be something that is a step in the right direction here. But between this and Google's Gemini, which has been announced but hasn't really been publicly released, we'll have to see what Google is really going to do in the long term. But in the short term, this should at least make the Bard experience that much better, that much easier. Individual users are now going to have access to using GitHub's Copilot. So I believe this works through Visual Studio Code as basically a plugin. The service costs about $10 a month, if I recall. So like you see here, you have a conversational AI, you have a coding window, and you can speak back and forth and basically ask it, what do I do next? Or how do I fix this? What do you suggest here? Common use cases here that it points out are real-time guidance to suggest best practices. You get tips, you get solutions tailored directly to the code you're working on. The idea for something like this is you can tell it, this is what we're working on, this is what we're trying to create together, and you go on a joint venture, and you've got an integrated teammate that's basically helping you and auto-completing things along the way with a full understanding, hopefully, of what it is you're trying to actually do. From my experience more so with GPT-4, I'll say that it's not perfect, but it is so much better than trying to do these things on your own or Googling individual problems and trying to find the exact code solution for what it is that you need help with. It's so much easier to paste an error code and just ask it, what could cause this? And here's an example of the code that triggered that. And so that's a future that we're moving towards where it's not exactly programming for you, it's programming with you. The final biggest story I want to talk about today is going to be the upcoming changes for Amazon Alexa. And this should hopefully bring AI and Amazon a little bit closer together and more obvious for people to see. So far, a lot of their AI stuff has really been on the back end. But the other reason I want to talk about this is because Google Home, for me, is such a sore spot. It is probably one of the worst and least useful Google services out there. The hardware for the Google Hub, the Google cameras, things like that is great, but the software is atrocious. And so competition here is a very, very good thing in my opinion. And hopefully this will put a foot in Google's butt to get Bard into Google Home's system. But I digress. What we have here is Alexa being turned into a large language model. So you've got your kid at home, for example, and your child can actually have a full-on regular conversation with Alexa. The article says the latest model's been specifically optimized for voice. The things we know our customers love, like having access to real-time information, efficiently controlling their smart home, getting the most out of their home entertainment. And based on the article here, when they were putting the idea of this Alexa LLM together, they had these 5 core principles that they kind of stuck to. So you can read here what that's all about. Conversational, real-world applications, personalization, personality, and trust.
Can you write me a story about balloons?
Interesting.
Actually, can you do Jell-O instead?
Sure. There was a boy named Caleb who loved Jell-O more than anything in the world.
Can you write us a poem about love?
The following is a poem about love. Love is a feeling bright and true. It warms your heart and lights your...
Actually, it's...
All right, so that gives you a little bit of a preview. Definitely check out the link in the description if you want to see the full video, if you want to see a lot of the different examples. Again, it's a technology that I'm excited about. I don't even use Alexa in my own home, but I can see an amazing future where AI assistants are more closely integrated. Better than Siri, better than Google Assistant, all of that stuff. And so when I see stuff like this, it's exciting because it feels like a step in the right direction. But I am very curious to know your opinions of it. I know not everybody is the techno-optimist that I can be sometimes. But I'll leave you with that for today. I'll end today's video by thanking you again for your time here with me today. I really appreciate your interactions with the channel, your subscriptions, the notification bell, hitting that like button, all that stuff really, really helps out. I hope you enjoyed today's little preview into the future, and I'll see you next week for another AI news, drama, and updates. Thanks for watching.